When I was 19, I got arrested for trying to steal a phone from Walmart. It was the dumbest thing I'd ever done, and I still hate even admitting it. I was with two friends, and the whole thing started as just one of those stupid ideas. I thought I could open the packaging, slip the phone into my hoodie pocket, and walk out like nothing happened. Instead, loss prevention stopped me before I even made it to the exit. I didn't know they watched the cameras like that. Within an hour, I was sitting in the back of a police car with my hands cuffed behind me, staring at the same parking lot I had driven into like a normal person earlier that day. It was a Friday night, which made everything worse. I kept thinking my parents would come get me, or that I'd just get a ticket and go home. But after I was brought to the station, processed, fingerprinted, and questioned, I was told I'd be spending the weekend in county, because court wasn't open until Monday. Hearing that made my stomach twist. I still remember the feeling of helplessness. I had never been in real trouble before. I had never even been suspended from school. And now, I was being walked into a local jail in handcuffs over one of the most embarrassing decisions of my life. The booking process took forever. They took everything on me, including my clothes. Then they gave me an orange jumpsuit to put on. And that's really when the gravity of the situation I got myself in became real. I remember changing into it and looking at myself for a second, feeling sick. When they finally brought me back to the holding area, I realized very quickly that nobody else looked like me. I don't mean that in a better-than-them way. I just mean I looked young, scared, and completely out of place. Some of the men in there were older, bigger, tattooed, and looked like genuinely dangerous, scary people. A lot of them were loud, acting like this was some fun place to be that they'd been 10 times before. A few of them looked at me like they were annoyed I even existed. Some guys actually made fun of me, calling me pretty boy. I tried not to react, but I could feel my face getting hot. I stared at the floor most of the time and tried to look calm, but I'm sure everyone could tell I was terrified. After a while, a fresh group of arrestees got brought into the day room, and we were all told we could make phone calls. I called my parents, and my mom answered. The sound of her voice almost made me break down. I told her where I was and what happened, and then my dad got on the phone. He wasn't screaming, which somehow made it worse. He just sounded disappointed. He told me they had already called an attorney and that I would most likely be out on bail by Monday after I saw the judge. Monday was so far away, though. I wanted to ask them to get me out sooner, but I knew there was nothing they could do. After the call, I had to go back into the day room and pretend I wasn't on the verge of panicking or crying. Later that night, they assigned me to a cell. My cellmate was a man in his 30s. Who told me his name was Bobi. I almost didn't believe that was his name. At first, I was almost relieved because he wasn't screaming or acting aggressive like some of the others. He had a calm voice and talked to me like a normal person. He asked what I was in for, and I stupidly told him. He laughed a little and said that was nothing, that I'd be fine. For the first hour or so, he actually made me feel less alone. He told me how to deal with the routine when meals came, how to keep to myself, and not to let anyone see me looking too nervous. I remember thinking maybe I got lucky, but that feeling didn't last. As the hours dragged on, Bob got too comfortable with me. He started asking personal questions, like where I lived, if I had a girlfriend, what school I went to, and if I still lived with my parents. I gave vague answers, but he kept pressing. Then, he started making comments about how young I looked and how I didn't belong there. At first, it sounded like a concerned elder, but then it started sounding creepy. He would sit too close on the lower bunk with me when we talked. He touched my shoulder more than once, and once, he put his hand on my knee while laughing at something he said. I moved away right away, and he smiled, like he knew exactly how uncomfortable he was making me. From then on, I dreaded every second the cell door was closed. The day room became the only place where I felt like I could breathe, even though that place was terrible too. I would wait for the doors to open just so I didn't have to be alone with him. The days and nights blended together, and it all felt like one long day because there was no damn sunlight in that depressing place. The lights never fully went off. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like Bobi was watching me. One time, in the middle of rest time, I don't even know if it was nighttime, I opened my eyes and saw him looking down from the top bunk, straight at me. He saw me wake up and said he couldn't sleep either. I didn't answer him. Those 47 hours felt longer than any full week of my life. By the time I finally saw the judge, I was exhausted, and yet excited to leave. I barely remember what was said. I just remember hearing that I was being released. And later that day, my dad picked me up. When I got into his car, he wasn't angry. He was strangely sympathetic, but disappointed. I didn't want to talk about jail, Bobi, or anything that happened. I wanted to shower, sleep in my own bed, and pretend the whole thing had just been a bad dream. A few days later, I got a follow on Instagram from a fake-looking account. My profile was public at the time, so random accounts weren't unusual. It had no real name, no posts, and the profile picture looked like a dark, blurry room. I ignored it. Later that night, I got a DM from the account. When I opened it, it was a selfie from Bobi. His face was close to the camera, with that same little smile he kept giving me in the cell. Under it, he had written, "Miss you already." I blocked the account immediately and threw my phone onto the bed. I felt violated in a way. He knew my real name. He found my profile, and I had no idea how. 2 days later, I came home from work in the late afternoon. It was a foggy day and my parents were both still at work. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a ratty old car parked across the street. Someone was sitting inside, with their head down. I sat in my car for a second, watching it. I couldn't see their face, but something about the way they wouldn't move was concerning. I went inside fast and locked the front door behind me. A few minutes later, while I was standing in the kitchen trying to tell myself I was being paranoid, I heard the front door knob. Instead of knocking or ringing the bell, whoever was outside was turning the doorknob back and forth, like they were testing if it was unlocked. Then, they stopped. It was not even 40 seconds later when I heard the back doorknob do the same thing. That's when things became real. And I called 911. As weird as that felt after spending a weekend in jail, I whispered at first, because I was afraid whoever it was would hear me. I told the operator someone was trying to get into my house. While I was on the phone, the doorbell rang. The operator asked if I could see who it was. I told her I was too scared to check. I told her I thought it was the man I shared a cell with in jail. She told me not to answer the door and to wait for the officers. By the time the officers arrived, the car was gone, and whoever had been at the door was gone too. I told the officers everything. I told them about the arrest, the weekend in jail, Bobi, the Instagram message, and the car outside. The second I admitted I had just been in jail, I felt their attitude change. They weren't rude per se, but they didn't seem eager to help either. One of them asked if I was sure I wasn't just shaken up from the weekend, which really pissed me off. Another asked if I had given this guy my full name. I said no. They left me with a report number, and that was basically it. For the next week, nothing happened, and I tried to convince myself it was over. Then one night, I went to a dive bar with friends. They weren't my friends who knew about the arrest. Outside of my family and the friends that knew, I didn't tell anyone else. We were standing near the pool table when I looked toward the far end of the bar and saw Bobi sitting alone. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled down low and a dark jacket, like the guy was freaking incognito. But I knew it was him. He wasn't looking directly at me when I first saw him, but a few seconds later he lifted his head, and when he saw me looking at him, he smiled. The fear and concern in my face had to be so obvious that my friends asked what was wrong. I lied and told them there was a girl that I didn't want to deal with and that I wanted to leave. We left through the front, and I kept expecting Bobi to come out behind us. In the parking lot, I told my friends I was calling an Uber home but to wait with me. The second I got in, I called my parents and finally told them everything I had been leaving out. That night, they put their foot down. We went straight to the precinct. This time with my parents there, and with the Instagram message still saved as a screenshot. They took it more seriously. I told them about the attempted break-in, the fake account, and seeing him at the bar. I signed a sworn statement, and eventually, I was able to get a temporary restraining order.